Alafia, may I borrow this chair, please? I have to stay next to the computer, so forgive me for sitting. Greetings and respect to all of the elders, the Amor, the devotees. It's a great pleasure to be here. I'm going to go through this as quickly as I can. Setting the timer. All right. Whew. Sounds a little loud. I am going to present today the work that I completed for my PhD. It is the work grounded in the Orisha, fired by Eshu Elegbara, taking the stories of the Orisha, which we call the Pataki in Cuba, out into the academic world. I'm very, very humbled and glad to be here. I will be racing, but I believe there's a discussion section sometime later, so we can take down the questions and I can answer them later. So this is the outline of the thesis. I just wanted to point out that there is an entire chapter devoted to Orisha Eshu Elegba to explain the phenomenon itself. And then I get into the theory, the methodology, and the actual literature. So when I started my journey into Ifa Orisha, I am a literature person. I've always been a literature person. I was very drawn by the stories, the Pataki, the Oriki. And I found that when I went to different places, the stories sounded different. There were versions of the Pataki. And this led me down a rabbit hole where I realized that because we're based in oral literature, and because of our environments, and because of our communities, and because of our history, we have had as a people to hide our stories quite a bit. So I started looking at texts in which the Pataki were present, some more so than other. There was mention of, I believe it was because of Lord Gibbons, Loveless, Wine of Astonishment. There's been so much talk about Ogun and Lupan, and of course we in Despers. And I just wanted to read a quick line from the very last page. Then, as we turned the corner where Miss Hilda living, on a spot where our old house fall down, in the next yard there, with bamboo four-posts and coconut branches for a roof, is a steel band tent. And in this tent is the steel pans. And playing these pans is some young fellows, bareback and with tear-up clothes. And it have two girls dancing to the music that they play. But I not looking at the girls, I listening to the music. For the music that those boys playing in the steel band have in it the same spirit that we miss in our church. The same spirit. And listening to them, my heart swell, and it's like resurrection morning. Tell me all you feel Ogun in that. This is the liminality that I talk about in the title. There is an existence, an Eshu-ish existence, where we know the thing is there. But how do we point it out? How do we prove it? And how do we objectively prove it to those who have no idea what we are talking about? So these are the texts that I decided to study. And in academia, you have to study all the theories and the theorists and the isms and the schisms. And I came to find that none of the ists matched the energy of the Orisha for my research. And I was so glad to have come across Professor Funcho Ayeji Naibai and his writing, which said that we should be doing our own thing. We should forge our own path. We should not wait for others' authority or permission to do what aligns with our spirits. And after that, as the Cubans say, it was download. Then came the Pataki Continuum and the trichord formula. That was the quotations. So I'm going to get into, check my time real quick. Yeah. I'm going to get into the theory that I created. Created is a word I'm uncomfortable with. That I communicate, and then the methodology. And I think what's the greatest takeaway from this is the use of a language that we can use and that interreligious, international communities can use to have a conversation about the spirit in the work. Yeah? So there are three metaphors that I use in postulating the theory, and the one that I love the most, and I think is the clearest, is that of whales, right? So everybody knows whales. They are mammals, they live in the ocean. But the thing about whales is that for the majority of their movement, they move underwater. They move submerged. And if you're at sea, you could be in a ship with a whale underneath you and never know. Sound familiar? You have to have specialized tools to be able to read and decipher what is existing when it doesn't show itself. And so when it comes to the literature and the pataki, I talk about submerged pataki. That is to say that the stories of the Orisha are in the text, but it's not easy for just anybody to find. If you... Is that better? That's good? Everybody hear me? Thanks. I just thought it was loud. Yeah. If you... Submerged pataki. If you know of the Orisha, like reading that last paragraph, it seems really obvious. To you, I mean, that is obviously Ogun they're talking about, but to other people, they can't see it. They don't understand it. So I talk about the submerged text. Then I talk about soft breach text. Soft breach text are texts like a whale just coming up for air because they have to breathe because they're mammals. So they're seeing something, but they're not sure what it is. And they tend to call it folk. They're all over the place calling it folk. When is Ifa business? It's Orisha business. But they don't know. And then I talk about full breached and hard breached text. That comes like when the whales are totally all out of the water, flipping and making turns and dancing. And what's really interesting is the relationship I make between the texts in their submerged, soft breach, hard breach forms and the communities in which the practitioners live. So I've come to find that there's a relationship between the breach level of the text and the communities. So in communities where there is still quite a bit of fear, opposition, ignorance, we tend to produce submerged texts. And in communities where Ifa is celebrated and adorned and respected and fully acknowledged, we tend to produce more hard breach text. So I'm coming up now, I'm going to skip the trajectories. I'm coming up now to the methodology. So, okay, we understand the idea. The stories of the Orisha in the text. Sometimes they're hidden, sometimes you could see a little bit, sometimes it's obvious that you could see it. But how do we prove this objectively? And that's where the trichord formula comes in. So, using issue and issues numerology 3721, which does have some variations according to different regional diasporas, I talk about the three chords, hence the trichord formula. So you have the chord that is music, which is of course integral to us as practitioners, as a Orisha. And I talk about the harmony between the worlds involved in a text. I also talk about the chords as rope, umbilical rope, that ties and connects us to source, that brings us to ancestry and memory, and gives us identification. And I also talk about, well, yeah, I cover those two together. So I'm saying that in the three worlds, the story world, which is what is happening inside a text, the literary world, which is what's happening now, talking about a text, the publisher, the author, the readers, that kind of stuff. And then the cosmological world, the world of the Orisha and of spirituality, that they operate as cords, as the cords that bind in an umbilical cord, in a rope, or the cords that combine to create beauty in music. And I'm saying that with each chord, we can measure 7 elements. I'm not going to get into the details of it. We are free to talk later. And information is available, I'm sure, through the Euphoria Council, right? But the variables or the elements are naming, traversing, mode, voicing, tangibles, entities, and plot. So I'm using the same system of the Upwelle, the same system, binary, of divination that tells us what is and what is not. So it's either an element is present or is not in the story world, in the quote-unquote real world, or in the cosmological world of the text. And then, because we're dealing with a Shu and that tree number, we work the 3 and 7 together in order to get an average that is plotted along a graph. And this gives us the submerged level where the text exists. So for wine of astonishment, these are the plottings here. You'll see either 1 or 0, present or absent. And then you get the average, so you get 7. The total is out of 7, that's 2.5. So this is the location of the wine of astonishment along the Pataki continuum using the trichord formula. And it tells us that this is a submerged text, which is of course understandable because of the era in which it was published. We were just coming out of the Prohibition recall, and we were still, some might argue are still, fighting against biases and ignorance regarding the practice. So I would have done this for the 3 texts from Trinidad and Tobago and the 3 texts from Cuba, because I am imbibed in both systems in order to place them along the Pataki continuum and discuss where the texts are, but it's also a reflection of where we are. And I am so glad to hear the presentations that I've heard already this morning. I love that we're all forward thinking, and we're thinking about what are we going to do next and what do we have to do, and I love that we're working together. This very presentation, the conference, is evidence of the desire and the aim and the goal and the objectives and the willingness of the community to come together. There are people from very Shrine, Ely, etc. here, so I look forward to that as well. What I would like to close off with would be the main contributions. So we have a literary theory, which in itself is a rare thing, by the way. The theories that have been used for literature for the past decades have come from other fields. They come from sociology or anthropology or psychology. So we talk about feminism and Marxism and post-colonialism and Orientalism and transculturation, but they don't come from literature at all. So we have a literary theory, and more specifically one that's based in Eurasia. So we have our own theory. So that's the first thing. Then we actually have a methodology that can be used by anyone who has the access to the elements that have been listed. And I do provide those elements in the thesis as well. And we have a number of tools for it. Now, for people outside of our practices, some of these words they would have never heard in their lives. Odu, Orisha, some people Ifa, are ideas that you have to explain all the time. But through the Pataki continuum and the trichord formula, these words become, well, it's part of the discourse. You can't discuss the Pataki continuum or the trichord formula without discussing Ifa and Odu as the source of the Pataki, without discussing Orisha and the entities, that is to say, the elements that are assigned to each, the colors and numbers and animals and metaphysical representations, so that that becomes a language that we can begin to converse in that will help alleviate the ignorance and, as Ia was saying, add to visibility, clarity, as they begin to understand what we're talking about. Additionally, we all know the term diaspora. Not BC Philip postulated an Afrospora. And in this, I also add that along a bit by saying Orisha spora. So we talk about the Orisha people all over the world, yeah, no matter what line we are in, whether we are Santeria, whether we are Candomblé, whether we are Ifa practitioners, etc. And we also have the language of breaching to explain where things are in a very simple way, because it's a very complex idea, and to talk about where we are as a people. And I just want to add in here that if you're following the metaphor of the whale, in order for a whale to hard breach, it has to submerge. It can't go from soft breach, from where it's breathing, into airborne. It can't. So when you find that a society, and in this particular, good time. When you find that a society, and in particular a people, look like they've been hiding a bit, it might just be that they're building momentum, and that's what I'm feeling right now. That we've been building momentum, and the next time they see us to figure out what we are, we will be airborne. And this is really exciting for me, and I'm really glad to be here. And therefore, I'm going to close this up right now and say that I give thanks to Baba Baba Elegbara Elagwana, and that I pray that Elegua continues to illuminate and materialize the liminal for us, that which seems so hard to define and to put hands on becomes easily in reach. Ashe, thank you for your time.